to pretty much any heap corruption vulnerability out there, buffer overflows, use after freeze, double freeze, and you should be able to exploit it. And finally, I think I have a minute left. Finally, I'll go over briefly about the potential mitigations for stopping this technique. One of the better ones that I could think of was heap isolation. If Internet Explorer actually used different heaps, different dedicated heaps for the different components, then you would not be able to manipulate the heap of some ActiveX object, because the ActiveX object would use its own heap, not the same as your strings use. This is something that could potentially be done in the next version of the browser. The other mitigation technique is introducing some non-determinism or randomness. So if the heap allocator doesn't always return blocks in the same location, you will not be able to predict very well what the heap layout is going to be. And you can probably do this without sacrificing too much in terms of performance or reliability, although it'll make it a little bit harder to debug. So these are the two methods for breaking this technique. I encourage you to stay for the next talk when the WebSense guys are going to talk about this technique they have for detecting heap corruption vulnerabilities. So I'll be pretty interested in actually seeing that myself. So any questions? Yes?
So what about that NX as a mitigation?
The question was what about NX as a mitigation? Well, obviously, if you have NX, you cannot execute your shell code from the heap. What you can still do, though, is you can use the heap manipulation techniques to override data, and that data doesn't necessarily have to be function pointers or object pointers. It can be some other kind of data that the application uses in some way. You can override some kind of permission setting that is somewhere in memory. So obviously, shell code is a lot more convenient and easier to do more generically. But application data overrides would certainly be possible, and this would be a very useful technique for that. Yes? Yes, the question was about is there a JavaScript library included in Metasploit? After I presented this at BlackHat Europe, Scape, like I think on the next day, he was actually in the audience, and on the next day he took that code and wrapped it in some Ruby and shoved it into Metasploit. So it has been there for a couple of months now. It is not as it is not as easy to use as the standard Metasploit modules because it's JavaScript, so it doesn't integrate very well with the Ruby. But you can certainly use it in a Metasploit module. Yes? The question was, what if the collect garbage function was not exposed? Are you a Microsoft developer? If the collect garbage function was not exposed, we would not be able to directly trigger the garbage collector. However, if the garbage collector relies on certain heuristics, such as the number of objects allocated, we would still be able to trigger it. And remember that the JavaScript objects are allocated on a separate heap, so we can allocate as many of them as we want without changing the state of the default process heap, which is the one we care about. So I don't think that removing the collect garbage function is going to be a major obstacle to using this technique. One thing that could break it is if they implement a generational garbage collection schema, or some more complicated garbage collector that doesn't behave that's not as simple to manipulate as this one. So maybe we'll see that in the future. Maybe not. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.